Okay, so right now, guys, so as I already told you, right, we can definitely discuss all these topics in depth, whatever you require. But I'm going to put my focus, since you guys have particularly come to this session trying to understand, full stack Java development as well as with respect to UI UX, right? So we're going to cover these both topics here. Okay, around the topic what's called as how the industry has fast forward in terms of its technologies and application. What are the skill sets requirement? So first, let me start with full stack development. Okay, now let's do one thing. Okay, you guys should know a little bit about full stack development, etc. I'm not going to give you gyan from how an engineering classroom looks like. I'm going to go to the very basic scratch. Okay, let's say I'm going to explain to a kid how does a full stack development work. I'm going to take it to the very advanced level in terms of how at this point of time full stack development is used extensively. Okay, so first of all, right, if you look at it, right, what is a front end? Now, what is a full stack development? Full stack development includes development of an application, which is a website, app, etc. From the front end, the user perspective, as well as from the back end. Now, what is the front end part of it? The front end part of the development usually involves, working on the website, the app, the user experience of the app, etc., etc. So the goal of the front end developer is very simple to ensure it's easily readable and navigatable. Now, what are the different tools that I use? JavaScript, CSS, HTML is there. The details regarding this end of the session I'll tell you. Now, if you look at the back end, right, it's a little bit more complicated process. Now, there is some action that you're giving. You're ordering a food, you're searching a map, you're kind of navigating a map, okay, or you're going to a certain Instagram post, you're uploading a video, doing something, right? All this data needs to be processed in the backend, and the user interface needs to be given accordingly. So when you order a food, you have to get the food, right? So the thing that happens in the backend is all about the backend development. For example, it includes servers and applications, databases, different languages that are predominantly used as Java, PHP, .NET, SQL. Java is something that we'll be extensively discussing in this aspect. So but the point is, the user doesn't always look like this, right? You might be a full stack developer, right? But the user looks at only the front end, just the front face of the app. Whereas the application always involves the front end and the back end. Okay, yes, we do have roles and designations talking about front end developer, back end developer, but typically all these people eventually get evolved into a full stack developer. Okay, because they start with certain strengths, either the front and the back end, and then they eventually evolve to a front end developer. I mean, full stack developer. Now, the point is that user only sees 20% of the effort. Okay, whereas 80% of the effort typically happens in the backend. Right? That's how the perspective looks like. Now, what makes a full stack developer, right? If you look at the front end, right, it typically involves certain languages like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? And it's all about image editing, accessibility, cross browser issue, and search engine optimization. Whereas the backend is all about scalability, security, data transmission, backup. There are different programming languages that are used, such as Python, Ruby, Perl, server architecture. That's a very different process altogether. Now, what makes a full stack, right? The composition of the front end as well as the back end makes a complete full stack, right? So that's one part of it. Again, so what happens is when you're a full stack developer, it's not just essential to learn the languages and the frameworks for the front end. The back end is also something that you need to learn. The strengths and weaknesses, the depth will vary according to the role that we will be exploring it down the line. Okay, so that's one important part. So what are the full stack services or a full stack development comprise of, especially when you use Java as one of the languages? A, it includes a front end. B, it includes a back end and the database with which these both aspects are stored. Okay, now let's take a very silly kindergarten level example. You guys know front end and back end, no doubt about it. But the point is that if you want to get a job, right, you should go to the granular level of upscaling yourself, understanding the right niches, etc. So let's take a very simple example, understand it, something what you already know a little bit here and there, and then let's take it to the actual application level. Now, when you go to a restaurant, right, there is a waiter who comes and gives you a menu card, and you are the person who's sitting and eating. So the front end is very similar to the waiter. The front end is very similar to the menu card. Okay, you look at it, you choose food, you give customization orders to the waiter, etc. And what is the backend? Okay, the backend is like a kitchen, right? And the waiter is a one, right? He's connecting the front end and the back end. So who's this guy connecting the front end and the back end in the actual application? We'll understand that. So that's how the framework looks like. There is a table and you are a user. There is a kitchen and a chef, and there is a waiter who's connecting the both. So what happens is, right, when you take the table, right, there is an ambience. How does it look around when you come inside the restaurant? Okay, if you don't really like the restaurant, you'll run away from the restaurant. Now you come inside the restaurant, you don't really like the menu. There's nobody there to explain the menu for you, right? That's where the waiter comes as a role of a chatbot or a messenger or a help category, something like that. So this is the interface, the front end of it. Now what are the languages used? So menu card is basically printed, right? Similarly, the actual front end application of an app or a website or something, tools like CSS, CSS, HTML, and CSS they're basically used as a combination. Okay. Now again, let's understand there is something called as a JavaScript. Okay, this is like a waiter who's connecting the front end and the back end. It works like that principle. Okay, so JavaScript can give a user a great experience on the page, at the same time help him find the right information. It's also a language that is used for sending the request to the backend. So the waiter is a person who takes your order and gives it to the restaurant. Very similarly, JavaScript is the front end part of it, which enables the user to choose easily. At the same time, the instructions are taken and given back to the backend process. Okay, now coming back to the backend. The backend is all about kitchen. The chef takes the order, cooks it, etc., etc. It's a completely different perspective, guys. Okay, because it need not be very clean. I mean, not clean. It need not be very beautiful looking aspect, but it has to be very efficient. Just say, right, okay, 10 customers come, there are only 3 waiters, okay, they give orders, all these 10 orders, the kitchen has to be very, very efficient. So on the similar line, right, whenever an app is there, right, for example, let's take something like a big billion days, Flipkart, okay, or Amazon has something called as an Amazon day, something like that, right? So what happens, right, from the usual behavior, there are a lot of people who order on that point of time. Or let's take an Ola cab, right? Typically around 6 o'clock, when a lot of office people come out of office, book a cab, go to their home, people travel to airports, railway stations, morning and evenings. So that's what, right? The backend has to be very, very efficient at that point of time. Similar to a lot of orders getting received in the kitchen. So the chef, the ambience, the infrastructure has to be super efficient. That's in backend process all about. So if you look at the entire globe, right? Choosing a meal is your front end. Okay. JavaScript is like a waiter who gives you the experience of a good front end and takes the instruction and gives it to the kitchen. He stops there, right? The kitchen is a guy who continuously processes the request, ensure he delivers food on time, etc., etc. So the philosophy is very simple. Front end is all about beautifulness. It's all about efficiency, easiness, readability, etc., etc. Backend is all about dynamic, robust, right? Even if you receive 10 orders, you ensure all the meals are of the same quality. See, you give one order that he gives extraordinary food. You give 10 orders, he should give the same level of food. He cannot reduce the quality. So same way, the backend has a philosophy of being dynamic with a very robust website architecture. Right now, how do I choose which is more suitable for me? So full stack isn't it's a front end and a back end put together, right? But how do you choose? What are the qualities that you need to look into? For example, let's answer some questions. I'm going to ask you some simple questions. Okay. Hey guys, do you really enjoy making web design mockups that come to your life? Right. For example, if you open an Ola app, right, it's beautiful. You're able to designation, drop, book, and then take the ride. Are you very artistic, right? For example, do you have an aptitude for visual framework? So are you interested in ensuring there's an excellent user interface, right? You're focused on giving a very good responsiveness to the user, etc. So whenever you use an app, if you're consistently, looking only at these aspects, right? If you have an answer to one or many of these questions, then you are a guy who is more having qualities that are more attributed towards the front end. That's where you guys fit. At the same time, when you order an app, right? Let's say you make a payment gateway, or you're kind of choosing a food and ensuring whether it's available in the restaurant or not. You're thinking on that level. Okay, why a delivery guy is taking some time to get the order, get it delivered, and he's taking some time to times to express the deliver the order, right? At the same time, you are good in coding, right? You are taking more challenges. You are more like a behind the guy architecture. You give inputs, I'll give the best thing for you, right? Are you ready to explore libraries, frameworks, etc.? If you have answers to one or many of these questions, then you are a guy of the backend, right? But if you can give an overall answer to both the front and the back end, a mix of all this approach, then you are a guy who is ready to pursue the career in full stack development. Okay, so what you can do is the learnings can be in the front end and the back end, but you can specialize down the line enough, front end or back end. So you can always learn the entire full stack and decide where you're going to fit in the value chain. Right. Now let's address a little bit of the technicalities. For example, let's look at the front-end languages. As I already mentioned with the kitchen example, no, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Ajax. Now, HTML, CSS give the front page of the app or the website. JavaScript is the one that also gives the experience and at the same time connects it towards the backend. So that level of process there. So these are the front-end languages that you need to understand. But one important thing, don't come and tell me, so 7th semester, I got a HTML paper, A grade, therefore I'm a front-end developer. No. Remember that thing. Can you show a project? Can you show an application? Can you show an industry exposure? Can you show an internship? You have done something. You have kind of impacted, let's say, a delivery a perspective or something that you've done to a user. That is what your skill that is required in the front end language. Similarly, when we talk about backend, it's a little bit more complex architecture. Java is something that's predominantly used, guys. Trust me, most of your applications typically run on Java. So Python and Java is interchangeably used. There's some platforms that run on Ruby, some on C#, some on Objective-C, PHP, Perl, MySQL. There are a lot of things that go there, but predominantly Java and Python has been used. Okay, now what is a front-end developer responsible for? Let's understand this. Okay, so you need to work on designs, get the mockups ready. You need to put the architecture. For example, is there any bug when I'm ordering on menu? Am I selecting multiple options? Am I selecting the right kind of menu, right? And you have to be very familiar with coding languages like HTML. We already discussed that, right? And ensure you develop a design. The design has to be same across all the devices, whether it's a phone, whether it's a smaller phone, a tablet, or a desktop, or a much larger desktop. So you are responsible for these kind of things. This is something that you should always keep in your mind. The backend guy, right? So he is more of the functionality of the website. For example, when you place an order, is it going immediately checking the inventory and stock and ensuring that the stock is available for you, right? For example, a lot of data, sensitive data transmits between the front end and the back end, right? You enter your address, credit card details, so ensure, for example, calculations are there. So let's say you're investing in a mutual fund, you're just checking whether it works or not, right? So you give certain inputs. This is what I'm going to invest over a period of year. A lot of complex calculations that need to run the back end, right? So that's the guy. That's a back end guy. You need to ensure that robust algorithms there, security checks, reporting. For example, my app has been running for the past 1 week, right? So is everything going good in the back end process, etc., etc. And most importantly, backup. If something fails, what is the backup that's available for me? Right. Now, coming from languages, we already saw the languages. No, what are the languages that are required for front end is basically HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Ajax. Now, frameworks are a little bit more advanced. Okay. So what are frameworks is, see, certain apps, right, have inbuilt feature. When you build a particular app, right, there are certain frameworks that have certain inbuilt features. So you just kind of enable the framework, it gets developed in the front. For example, Bootstrap, you have Angular, you have Foundation. There are many such frameworks that are used. Which one is better, etc. We'll understand it down the line. Similarly, backend has its own set of frameworks. For example, something related to cybersecurity, something related to cross-platform compatibility, etc. So that's where you have your JavaScript, Express, you have your Django, you have your Cake PHP, all this ASP.NET, etc. All these guys are available. Now, what makes an entire stack? Now, what is a full stack development, right? Let's take a company. Let's take this company called as Airbnb. What is an Airbnb's functionality? There is an inventory of houses, suites, apartments, etc., etc. There is a user who has a need, right? So Airbnb has taken a call. JavaScript, Ruby, MySQL, Java is my full stack. Is my perfect combination. This is what we call as a signature stacks. So when you go to burger chains, when you go to pasta, right, they give you a signature dish, right? The best dish that is available. So these are the signature stack what these companies have been using. Now that doesn't mean that this is the right combination for any business. This is something you must learn. It's not a popular based choice, guys. See, certain companies decide what stack is more suitable for them. Okay, because their business model relies on such kind of stacks. See, every tool or every framework or every language has its own disadvantages and advantages. So a kind of hospitality inventory business requires these kind of stack. For example, let's take something called as a Stack Overflow. That's a completely different business model. They use a different kind of stack, signature stack, which includes Redis, C#, Microsoft, and .NET, etc. Similarly, right, let's take Dropbox. Dropbox is not a very front-end heavy process because very simple. You open your file, you store your file. It's like a simple Windows, guys. You have different folders. The UX is very simple, but the backend process is very, very complicated. Why? Because enormous amount of data stored there. So what these guys use is that they use Python, they use Amazon, they use Python, they use AWS. That's for the backend process, the database architecture that is stored. So every business model, right? They have their own set of signature stack which they kind of decide upon. Okay, for example, Fitbit, right? Now you've seen this. For example, I am having a MI watch, right? So there's something called as a Fitbit app, and a watch and an app. So for them, it's the user experience is more important because the backend data is not so complicated, simple things. So they use Node.js, right? Typically that's used for the front end. They use JavaScript and they use Java on the backend. Okay, the one that connects the front end and the backend, and the backend programming language is Java. So the point is very simple, right? Every company, every business model has always a signature stack. Okay, so one is always a popular choice. The second one is how you're going to build your skill around these things so that those kind of companies can come and recruit you. That's what makes your interesting pursuit in terms of the skills. Now, this is the front end, the entire piece of front end. Okay, when you take the full stack development, right? We saw, for example, what are the different skill sets required, what are the different languages, what is in front end and what is the back end, and what are the technologies that you need to implement, and how complex are these behaviors, etc., etc. Now let's go a little bit deeper, trying and understanding the front end from a very different angle. That's where a completely different career track comes into the picture. That's a UI UX. Okay, see, first of all, right, even full stack department guy or a triple department guy is not eligible for this. Even when you guys work on devices, you will still have the front end architecture in the place. So the only difference is you guys have a little bit of more hardware into the picture, whereas this guys is typically, see, take Fitbit, no? Fitbit is not completely about technology. It's not like Swiggy where something that's remotely controlled. There is a device. So you have to ensure the device works wonderfully. Let's say you're working in Apple, right? You can't just be a computer science engineer. Even electronic engineers are accepted, engineers are accepted, right? So that's